I'm looking for a man in finance, trust fund, 6'5", blue eyes. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. Hi guys, I'm Natasha and welcome to another episode of The Usual Place, the podcast where we have real conversations about the headlines. So a recent Straits Times survey of 1,000 unmarried people explained the dating scene plainly. So it's bleak, it's hard to meet new people, dating can be expensive, and there are unrealistic expectations of love and relationships. Now, the number of marriages in 2025 is at its lowest since 2020. Now, I have a theory on why we're in the state. It's just because we're bad at dating. Now, to help me explore this, I'm speaking with two people who study Singaporean daters in different ways. So on today's episode, I have Liu Zhiqun, the co-founder of Kopi Date, and the other founder is your wife, Jing Lin. And your aim with Kopi Date is to humanize the dating experience, so moving beyond swiping and gaming the algorithm. So on Kopi Date, potential dates answer questions, and then your team curates one-on-one dates for them.
Exactly.
Sounds very helpful. Actually, you get them to the starting point before they, hedge about it and then don't even make it, right?
Precisely.
All right. So next to you on the couch, I have Dr. Kenneth Tan, an assistant professor of psychology in the School of Social Sciences at Singapore Management University. Now, what you research essentially is relationships from end to end. So that's from singlehood to why relationships end, sort of like a relationship scientist, right?
Yes,
all right. So you guys have all the answers to why we date the way we date. But I want to start with how on this podcast, we often talk about marriages and parenthood. We've talked about it a couple of times, but we often gloss over the starting point, which is getting people together, right? So singles actually do want to date and get married, and surveys do tell us that. But Zhiqun, has dating actually become harder in the last decade?
Wow. I think that's a difficult question to ask, to answer. But I think, in short, it depends, right? Fundamentally, I believe that dating and building long-term relationships is a skill, right? So if someone is more skilled at it, it's not as difficult, right? If someone is less skilled at it, it becomes more difficult. If you look back into the dating landscape, right, over the past decade or so, right, I think all of us probably dated in a bit over the past decade. But for myself personally, I think I've used a fair share of dating apps early on, right? And in the past, the challenge of dating is mostly around the idea of meeting people. Right? It's harder to meet people in general. There are common places to do so, in schools, in churches, maybe, in a workplace, right? But outside of that, it's a little bit more challenging. So it's a more logistical kind of like a problem and challenge, right? As we move towards the later part of the decade, there's explosion of technology, information, and that comes with expectations as well, right? And endless options, right? So the challenge evolved along the way from a logistical one to a more psychological one, right? Because of higher expectations, people find it more challenging to navigate those challenges along the way, right? But all in all, I think fundamentally, if you look at dating, it's really two people, two flawed individuals coming together, right, with sky-high expectations of the modern dating world, right? And yet, not that much core understanding of themselves yet, right? And or what they really want in a relationship. With all these ingredients coming together, it becomes really having to deal with the complexity of human emotions, of rejections, of judgment, etc. That makes dating incredibly hard overall.
So I hear it's a skills issue,
Yes.
user skills issue, which is what Kenneth actually studies. So you want to weigh in here? What exactly is the hard part of dating right now?
So, first of all, I think thanks for having me on the podcast. I think what we are facing, one part of it is, like you said, it's a skills challenge, but I do think that there is a lot more expectations that have been brought into understanding what relationships mean. In some recent surveys that we've conducted in our lab, we've seen that about 40% of the singles in our sample have not been in a relationship before. And so, they are sort of lacking the experience and the know-how to even navigate situations with connection with people that they might be interested in.
Can I ask why this is concerning? Why the age is concerning? Because to me at 21, we've often been fed the narrative before, right? So you go to school, you study, you focus on your grades, and then if you happen to a guy or girl catches your eye, then you're like, no, don't do that. But then when we finish uni, suddenly it's like the narrative switches to like, oh, you got to get married, you got to partner up, you got to get married kind of thing and have kids. So why are we worried that at 21 people haven't dated at all?
Right. And so I think on the one hand, if you've not had any experiences with being in a partnership before, I think you need definitely certain experiences, certain people to guide you through those kinds of experiences. But I think from the Singaporean mindset where we're thinking, okay, let's say if we need to get married, we need to get partnered, need to get a BTO, we're counting then back from X age. And then let's say we have 2 to 3 experiences to get a partnership that we want for life. And then it becomes extremely pressurizing to find the correct partner. And I think that really puts a lot of stress on evaluating a person, almost like a job interview, rather than really experiencing the person for who they really are.
So dating's really like a math question. So if you're
Yeah,
bad at math, then
unfortunately.
sucks for you.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. But I want to go back to something that Tijin said, which is about unrealistic expectations, right? Actually, what's the most unrealistic expectation you heard? Because you meet all the daters, you meet many daters, and for me, I've heard women say like, I only want to date men who are like 180, and then I'm like,
Yes.
but where are they? Like, because we're like not of Dutch stock lah. Where are these tall men in Singapore? Can you please stand up? But what are some unrealistic stuff you've heard?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Natasha. You're putting me on a spot here because I don't want to just pick out from our
It's okay.
community.
You're in a safe space. Go for it.
Yes, but generally speaking, we do see preferences, right, from many of our members in general, and it varies across all spectrums from height, right? You mentioned height is a big one, race, religion, and especially occupation, right? I think the point of time where it gets more challenging is where this requirements or preferences becomes a lot more specific, right? And it adds on top of each other together. So for instance, you mentioned about, wanting to meet someone who is Caucasian and is 180 and above and
I
is
was
like
kidding, by the way. I was just a
successful
TikTok
entrepreneur. There are such cases, right? That we have encountered. So because Kopi Date, at least at Kopi Date, we don't operate like a traditional matchmaking agency. We tend to understand a little bit more about the underlying reasons why some of these preferences there, right, in the first place, right?
And what is it? Like, is it certain like conditioning from like watching certain things like Korean dramas, then like guys must be like fair and tall and beautiful, and then like, is this where this is coming from?
Yeah, exactly. I think mostly it's from social media, right, where we come from a culture where we try to compare, right, and sometimes we see dating as a little bit more of like a status game, right? And it's not really answering the question of, is it really helping me to achieve my long-term dating goals, but more so of short-term dating goals, right? So that's what we notice. And as we further understand and dissect a little bit more of the reasons why, some of these, I would say, illusions dispel, right? And get to see that, actually, instead of 180, I just want to meet someone who can help me feel safe, right? And someone doesn't have to be 180 to help you feel safe.
Well,
right?
by the way, just for people watching, you're taller than 180. So was it, I mean, can I tap on your experience, but did you like, have an easy time when you were dating?
Earlier on, I was saying like, I guess I took it for granted that I'm 180. I didn't really have that problem in the first place, right? So, but as I do have shorter friends, right, who really told me about their experiences in dating apps, etc. And it is a real problem, right, because of the expectations that we have set up in general, right? Yeah. But all in all, I do see them as real things that people are bringing up. But I think with more conversation, with better clearer train of thought, they can maybe perhaps dispel some of these illusions of physical proxies of what they truly want or need in their relationship in the long run. Yeah.
Kind of agree.
Absolutely. I think actually some of the good things that are coming with dating culture nowadays is that there's a lot more knowledge. Hopefully it's accurate knowledge, but people are very much understanding of things like attachment styles and people's sort of way of resolving conflicts in certain ways. So I think there's a lot more knowledge. It becomes such that, hey, actually I need people to meet certain expectations of what I want in a partner and in a relationship. What we've seen from the research, I think that's quite interesting, is that people might have hypothetical ideals of what their perfect partner might be. But this doesn't always translate into the person that they actually say yes to or go out with. And so I think there's a little bit of a disconnect between what you think you ideally want and ultimately who you actually get paired up with, in a sense. Personally, I think if I were to have done dating app kind of profile matching, I don't think I've ever met my wife.
Well, so this idea of, because now we have access to social media, it's everywhere, and people put up content about, as you say, relationships and attachment theory and things about dating. Has social media added a whole new layer of pressure to something that was already hard enough? So, for example, I always remember this woman on social media. She records herself on every date. She doesn't show her the person she's dating, but she records herself and then she narrates it and then she rates the date and dissects it. Do you know this woman I'm talking about? No, okay, I'll send it to you guys anyway. But basically, there's a lot of unwanted pressure, and has social media actually broken our sense of what dating actually looks like? So it's just either you become a bad date story on social media, or you look at the fantasy couples, or if not fantasy couples, we find the couples on Instagram who have this beautiful life together, and then you're like, okay, if I don't get it, then I'm not gonna have it all. So has social media added on to that pressure? What do you think, Kenneth?
Yes, I think absolutely the case where our brains are not designed to get so much input from all over to social media to friends. We typically could only sort of process information that from the people that are closest to us. And now with all this influx of new information, I think our sense of what are realistic or standards that I can achieve or should be able to get have become a little warped in that sense. So social media, I think, is one of the very important things that has sort of adjusted our expectations in different ways.
And I'm curious because of where we are particularly. So I'm not talking very broadly. I'm speaking about Singapore. And so Kenneth, you actually say dating is suffering from optimization culture and that Singapore's achievement culture actually may spill into romance. So many of us have grown up in a system where there's a 10-year series and answer keys to everything. But when you date or find a life partner, there's no set formula per se, right? So I'm kind of curious, Zhiqun, when you meet people and the first date doesn't go well, do you see people who get very upset or they're like, I'm going to give up on this immediately?
Yeah, that definitely. I really like the point that Dr. Kenneth Tan mentioned around optimization culture, and I do feel that this is actually the case, right? And people are more, perhaps they might not have the skill sets or the right expectations for how a date should be, right? And many of the times with social media, we painted a very fairy tale-ish kind of picture, first dates, I get to meet someone that checks all the boxes, etc., and then everything goes smoothly down the line, right? So going back to the idea of love is a skill, we do believe it's important for individuals to equip themselves with the right perspectives and right relationship skills to be able to navigate some of these more difficult challenges, like emotional challenges, like rejections, right? Not seeing people as who they are, and understanding a little bit further down the line, right?
I mean, I get that point about rejection. It's difficult, and I don't think, and in the dating game, you kind of do get rejected a lot, right? It's not like the first person you meet. I mean, some people are lucky that way.
Yeah.
Not me. But, you do get rejected a lot. And it's difficult to process if you've never really gone through it. So I'm not sure it's whether getting rejected 100 times makes it better. But I don't know, Kenneth, do you think we should, actually be taught how to approach romantic relationships, since it's more complicated? Should it be a class in JC? Or this is a very Singaporean way of doing it, yes?
Yes. I think you've tapped on a very interesting way of thinking about how we should think about relationships. I mean, we've learned skills in JC about your subjects like history, econs, biology, so on and so forth. You're taught skills about project work, but no one ever teaches us skills about connection, and it might not have to be about romance per se.
Yep.
But I think especially in this age where a lot more of us are relying and talking to AI, that the human connection becomes so much more important to understand how to build and maintain. And so I think you can't. There's already sort of marriage prep marriage prep education. People go for marriage prep classes, trying to understand how to stay and maintain a romantic relationship for the rest of their lives, right? I think some of these lessons can actually be sort of transposed to the dating scene. How to make yourself feel safe, feel secure. I'm not asking, we're not teaching people to be pickup artists, of course, but I think we want to teach people to be socially confident. And I think some of these things can be learned, can be taught, maybe not in a formulaic way, because there are some things that you do that will attract one person, but be an ick for another person. And so I don't think we're trying to get people to practice and be sort of formulaic, but I think we want to get people to be able to understand and read social cues, and then respond to that accordingly, in a very sort of authentic way.
Zhiqun, do you see this happening with daters? Like they're kind of awkward, like in general?
I do, and I also notice that I also feel that currently in this current dating landscape, right, in modern dating, it's not a very beginner-friendly spot.
What do you mean?
In that sense where people are more and more judgmental, right? They tend to see it as like almost like a shopping kind of experience where I'm just looking out for checklist kind of attributes, right? And that created, that didn't allow people, many new singles who do not have those skill sets that Dr. Kenneth Tan has mentioned, to practice them, right? And to be able to build on those skill sets, right? Because they get shot down in social media, like what you mentioned, from the influencer, or, they get complained to by your friends and people are just ranting about, how bad other daters are. And I think the dating landscape would help if everyone's a little bit more understanding, I feel, and just keep in mind that everyone else is just trying. Right, it's just humans trying to connect, and sometimes they're not too good at doing it. And if you allow them a little bit more space and more understanding, maybe we will.
I'm glad you brought that up. It's a very good segue to my question about basic dating etiquette. Because I feel like people are too lax with it's the opposite end of the spectrum. I'll tell you what I'm talking about. So basically, when I go on dates, right? I'm bringing my best self. So in that I dress up, I get there early or on time, and I read the guy's profile so that I have something to talk about. Y'all are nodding your head, but people don't actually do this for me. Like they don't bring their best self. So for example, people ghost last minute, like they won't confirm the date to the last second, and then you're like, why am I waiting here for you to plan this whole thing? Or they even show up late. Like one time I was meeting a guy, he was 20 minutes late. He came and he didn't say sorry until I said, you're late. And then he was like, oh. And it was really awkward because he picked a spot that was closing. So people were mopping around us and putting the chairs up. And I was like, how do I get out of this? Bye, I got the ick. And I was out. But why do people not bring their best selves? If you're asking for people to be given a chance, but why in reverse do people not bring their best selves?
Yeah, I think that's a very real problem. And I think about it a lot. Sadly, we think about it a lot because it's something that we really want to solve, right? We hope that everyone can bring their best self because that's what makes dating work, right? But I think one thing that we notice, and is a multifaceted kind of a problem, right? One angle is that more and more people are seeing dating as a more evaluative behavior activity versus activity of connection. Right, and this brings me back to the point on the idea that dating becomes a little bit more commercialized in that sense, where or more of a consumeristic culture where people are choosing the best characteristic traits that society has told them is good, right? And so they fall back to, if I'm there to choose the best partner and try to get an outcome out of it, right? Then I'm going there, I'm focusing on evaluating people, right? Instead of trying to turn up in the best self and try to enjoy the date and fully experience the date, embrace the journey that comes together with it, right? So I can see a lot more singles opting for the more evaluative approach towards dating. They think that that's what it really is, but in reality, we strongly believe that approaching dating the more as an activity of connection, right, is a much more fruitful and a more meaningful and also a more enjoyable experience for everybody.
I mean, because if you're on the date, I'm also, it goes both ways, right? If you're evaluating
Exactly.
me, I'm also evaluating you. And if you're like 20 minutes late, it's like,
Yeah,
minus points.
yeah.
But I mean, I want to ask both you and Kenneth, is this problem perpetuated, like poor dating behavior perpetuated by dating apps, particularly because there's an illusion of choice where, okay, if this date doesn't work out, I can always get another one because there's always someone at the end of the screen, right? What do you think, Kenneth?
So I think one way, definitely the case that there is an illusion of choice, a lot of like choice overload, paralysis that comes from dating apps where you know that actually there might be the next person that you can swipe on and then go on the next date with. But I think it's also the case where your best self might also be a very performative self, vis-a-vis, let's say, not bringing your best self and rather being an authentic self. What we've seen from a little bit of our research is that there are many people who say that they actually don't want to work so hard
What does that mean now?
to get a date. Like they want things to just happen naturally and not try so much, but like for things to just happen.
Isn't it a bit of a fairy tale? Is it a very K-drama? Like the guy will suddenly hold the umbrella in the rain and while you're tying your
little
broken
bit
heel
of that,
or
yeah.
whatever. It doesn't happen,
That
right?
serendipity thing, but it seems like, and this is just some qualitative data that we have, that people say that they work so much on so many other things. Why do I have to work for love as well? But I guess maybe we shouldn't be seeing it as work, but just a way of presenting yourself in a way that's respectable to the other person.
Yeah. Zhiqun, what do you think?
Yeah. You mentioned about dating apps and how it affects the singles' behaviors, right? I think it's easy to put all the blame on the dating apps, right? Because
we need someone to blame today. Just let me do it.
yes. I'll get to that. Yeah, but I think in general, dating has been a pretty useful tool early on, right? When it first came out, it was like magical. You can have the world on your phone, right? And in fun fact, I actually met my partner
on a dating
app, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because I feel it's not seeing dating apps as a tool, and it's more so of how do you use the tool versus blaming on the tool, right? I think one interesting example is Jing. Actually,
this is your wife, Jing, right?
My wife, Jing, correct. And now my co-founder, right? She's in the other room. And when we first met on the dating app, right? She's the only person who, during the second message, was saying that, hey, let's hang out. Right, that's super rare because
As in her second message.
Her second message on the dating app.
Oh, okay.
Right, the first message says hi. All right, the second message says, hey, let's hang out. Are you down? Something like that, right? And I thought that was super refreshing because what she's doing is essentially skipping the entire gamification side of the dating app process, right? Where you text, where you try to impress each other, where you do a little bit of, games here and there, right? Texting games, right? But going straight into the real life meetups in general, and I think that's a very, very strong use case for dating apps, right? But I also want to point out that I also used to work in a dating dating app startup before, right? And
are you allowed to say which one?
It's in US, right?
Okay.
It's called the Bleak, lah. It's more.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's more.
It's for like high-end curated experience.
Yeah,
See, I know
exactly.
too much. I'm like the OG of all the dates.
They have
Dating
in
apps.
Singapore
I'm
as well,
still
yes.
on it. Well, I'm not on it, but I want to. I'm done with it for now. But I wanted to ask you, particularly about Jing, right? Yeah. Did you kind of get taken aback when she asked the second message? Immediately, the second message she was like, do you want to hang out? Because I think I'm not. Well, we'll talk about stereotypes in a bit. But when women do these things where they're quite forward, do you think it's like a turn-off for guys? Or it's just dependent on who the person is?
Not for me, I guess. I felt it was very refreshing because I felt that I was just going through the motion of chatting on dating apps and not getting much progress from there. And when she put out the message, I was like, hey, yeah, why not? That's exactly what I have in mind as well, right? I would love to get to know you properly, face to face, and that allows me to get to know you deeper.
So very interesting for me, because both of you, and I'm going to spill a little bit of like your dating life, but both of you did not meet your partners when you were in school. And was that, so is it game over if for Singaporeans if they don't meet because of how small Singapore is, right? And then when you do this and you don't find a partner in university or even in JC, secondary school, I don't know. Is it like game over? Does the research tell us anything about that?
Right. So I actually met my partner like at the tail end of school. So it was like,
Oh, okay.
I was
So
like,
you were the lucky one.
one of the lucky ones in a sense. But I think it becomes a very different experience once you are going out into the working world. Of course, there's a lot of balance between your time in terms of focusing on your career versus finding a relationship, and that trade-off becomes a lot more salient when you are out in the working world. What we see in the research in workplace romantic relationships is not the best kind of.
So don't date your coworker.
Well, not say don't, but it's not
It's not going to work out.
greatest. At least just on average, the repercussions might be a lot more could be a lot more secretive, a lot more things to hide, so on and so forth. But some complications. But I think the idea is that you have to become a lot more strategic with your time once you're out in the working world looking for a partner, and then I think it's and anecdotally, and a lot of people have said that it's just so much more difficult to meet someone who then is just looking out for experiences and not dating for, which is like the next stage, which is BTO, kids, marriage, so on and so forth.
Yeah. I would think the school experience is a bit easier because if you're in school, then you get to hang out in groups. So even if you like someone, there isn't the same pressure as like when you leave and you're out there and doing one-on-one dates, right? Do you agree that it's easier to look for someone when you're in school? Although I think people when they're in school, they don't think of it as long term. They're just like, I like this person, can I go out with it? But do you find there's less pressure doing that when you're younger?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think school is a great place to start. I did that in school right before, and I think it gave me a lot of experience, right? Of course, you make a lot of mistakes along the way as well, and those mistakes you take along with you to apply for your future relationships in general. But I do agree with your point of view on it's easier because you have lesser pressure and it gives you a lot of opportunity to get to know each other properly, right? Because nowadays when you go on a first date, you only have that set amount of time to make a very strong impression before someone makes a judgment on you. No or yes, right?
And is this why people date like it's a job interview? So I've often heard these stories of where, it's a checklist like how much do you earn, where do you work, what's your goal, do you have a car, that kind of thing, right? Why do people do it like this? Now, is it because of the time factor or they just want to cut their losses earlier?
Yeah, I think that's a great question as well. And I think when we were working on Kopi Date, we were talking to our members in general, and one of the questions that we usually ask them is, actually, why do you date, right? I think it's an important question to consider, and I think it's quite telling that many of my members' first answer to it is, because I just want to meet someone with X characteristic traits or Y characteristic traits, right? And that paints a clear picture of like, that's why on a date itself, they are just looking out for these characteristic traits because that's their angle, right? But if you actually consider and think about it a little bit further, really for someone to date, the reason why someone should be dating, perhaps it should be for them to get into a more healthier, more longer-term relationship, right? And then your approach towards dating should naturally, perhaps potentially change along the way, right? Instead of asking questions, take the first step to make a friend first, getting them to know slowly better, especially on a value-based approach, right? And also potentially instead of asking, does this person check boxes? Ask how do I feel when I'm with this person in general?
So when someone comes to you and they say, I want this person to have the XYZ, right? And then, so what would you tell someone like that? Because it sounds like they're looking for a product and not a relationship, right? Yeah. So what would you tell them?
Yeah, generally we will understand the underlying reasons why they are doing this and ask them a little bit more of why do they really want to get into why do they really want to date, right?
So it could be that actually they don't want to date lah. could it be that they are just following a script? Because Kenneth, you're nodding here. I mean, sometimes I think that people just follow a script like I've graduated, now I've got a job, so what's next, right? What do you think?
So I think this is something that's a very tight norm in Singapore culture, and Singaporeans are generally pretty tight around norms. They really follow norms pretty strictly, and so I think the motivation to date is something that people have looked at, and whether it's coming from the family or from yourself, I think has repercussions on how successful that relationship will become in the future. So we have people who've done our surveys who said that they are in a relationship but actually not ready for a commitment, but somehow they found themselves in one, and these relationships
Fall on this person?
Yeah.
How did they find themselves in one? But okay, yes, go ahead.
Sometimes you're like, I'll just go out with you because why not?
And then next year it's like 2 years later. It's
Yeah,
like,
but-
yes,
but
I'm still here.
they're still, but their relationships are like in terms of relationship quality, they're not better than others. They're poorer. They're not as satisfied. I think there are also the flip side where instead of people who have high standards, there are people who are actually really scared of being single as well, and so that changes the motivation to date. And what we've seen in the research is that for some people who are scared of being single, they actually lower their standards in terms of finding a partner. And how that translates into the ensuing relationship is that it's not going to be as satisfying, as responsive, so on and so forth, because you've actually lowered your standards.
And I want to go back to something you said about the ick, and also because you're lowering your standards and stuff. So you used this word, the ick, earlier. And so we've got a lot of vocabulary around modern dating, right? And there's like red flags, and then green flags, and beige flags, a lot of colors. And it's going back to what you said, Zhiqun, about not judging someone, right? But are these consequential things when someone says, oh, this guy's a red flag or this woman's a red flag? Or is it just an excuse not to give people a chance? Because I could be a red flag to men because I will only accept coffee dates because I don't want to spend more than an hour. But then they're like, oh, are you afraid of commitment? Kind of thing. 'Cause I could be a red flag. But so are these things consequential, or should people give each other a chance and not listen to the dating vocabulary?
Yeah, I think those are new vocabularies that that come up along the past few years. Now, those are very interesting. I think they're valid as well because most of the time people are looking for ways to see how they can be more accountable for their dating life, right? And they want to do a good job there, right? Whether or not it's actually doing the work, I'm not too sure, right? I think in general, when someone goes to approach dating, it's important to have clarity in terms of why they want to date, right? And many of the times, I believe most Singaporeans want to date because they want to get into a healthy and longer term relationship that's fulfilling, right?
Oh, they want a BTO.
Oh, they want a BTO, yes.
Which
right?
may not be very healthy, but okay, yes, sorry.
I think in general that's something that most people will want to move towards too, right? So if going through that train of thought, right, approaching dating should be more towards understanding someone properly, right? Instead of looking at small proxies that gives you a sense of who that person might be early on, right? So in my opinion, this might be unpopular. I do believe that red flags and icks are less, consequential, right? And I do believe that we should focus more on values instead, right? On whether or not this person makes me feel safe, whether or not I enjoy my version of myself, right? When I'm with this person, whether or not we have shared values and common grounds in the long run, right? Because those are the things that can help you to pull through to a more longer term relationships, if that's what you want, right? Of course, it's perfectly fine if you're just looking to date for short term, right? And in general,
then the ick factor is
the
like
ick factor is
yes.
wow, very good. It's very good for that. Yeah.
Kenneth, if a guy turns up on a date in Crocs and Bermuda, should I get the ick?
Possibly.
Well, what's your take on the vocabulary around dating? Like, does it hurt people more than it helps?
I do think that clarity is extremely important, like you mentioned. What we've seen is that for all the deal makers, all the check boxes that we want people to fulfill, deal breakers are actually are weighted much more in our decision on whether we want to see someone for the long term or not. They could correspond to red flags, but they don't always have to. I think right now red flags is just a very broad kind of sort of catch-all kind of phrase where like, oh, it's something I don't like about you. Actually, that's a red flag. But I think if people have their own deal breakers, then each one of us have our own idiosyncratic kind of like deal breakers. Some people like, no, I cannot date someone who smokes. I cannot date someone who gambles, and I think that those are perfectly fine deal breakers to have. So I think that clarity of whether it's something that really irks you, I think is extremely important. Or if it's something just, oh no, everyone says like being emotionally avoidant is like a red flag, but why is that person emotionally avoidant? Could that person be not avoidant with you after a certain period of time?
But it
Some of
takes
these things.
work.
It
So you
does
gotta-
take work.
So you gotta keep at it.
Yes.
Yes.
So I want to go back to something else you said about Singaporeans, because we, what you meant was that we are very straight about timelines and kind of thing, right? I wonder if this also applies to gender roles and expectations. Are we very strict about it too? And what I mean is that I feel like sometimes we still hold on to old school beliefs in dating, right? So like if a man asks to go Dutch, then he's stingy. Or if a woman cannot eat at lau pa sat, then she's like a princess or very high maintenance. Or even something as simple as the expectation of like a man should make a first move, and that women who do it are sometimes like called desperate lah. So do you think these stereotypes actually hold us back from dating properly? Kenneth?
So, I mean, I want to, I think, thread very carefully around gender and gender expectations. We definitely, I think, see a case that there's a lot more, we feel there should be a lot more equality in the workplace, in every aspects of our life, men and women. But I do think that gender dating scripts have not evolved as quickly as other gendered norms that are related to the workplace. Some parts of it, I think, has to be about communication. And I think you're trying to figure out the person who fulfills your norms or what you think is right and acceptable per se. Ultimately, I think what you want to be is, bring a self of you that's authentic, respectful towards the other person. That's what I would say.
Zhiqun, it sounds like a very dicey question.
Yes,
but
it
like
is.
gender stereotypes, why do we hold on to it? And I feel bad for the people who go on social media and tell their story, and then they get all the comments
Yep,
about
yep.
like, oh, you want to be a feminist, but you cannot pay for your share kind of thing. You've seen these comments,
of
right?
course,
So
of course.
do you think that these gender stereotypes actually hold us back from dating properly?
I think similar to what Dr. Kenneth Tan said, there's this wave of feminism going on, right? And I think it's very progressive, right? And from a dating perspective, we were pretty stagnant there, and that creates some level of friction, I feel, right? Where women in general, as a society, are more educated and earns a lot more, and are way more have different ideas and expectations, whereas men are in general, still having the expectations of doing the same thing as 20, 30 years ago, right? So I think it requires more communication and clarity with regards to that, right? But that movement itself has caused some level of friction, right? Because when someone is a lot more so for females wise, maybe if they're earning just as much, right? In general, is it fair to split the bill still, right? I'm not saying it's not, right? I think it's completely fair, but that is something worth discussing about, right? Should we also evolve our gender roles and expectations in the dating scene and in the relationship scene? Yeah.
So I want to ask you, something we also brought up was about single people, right? So I think the thing that Kenneth said in the research was that some people actually do want to be single. And there are a lot of people actually stepping away from dating to focus on themselves. We've seen the self-love era, and then they talk about dating fatigue, app burnout kind of thing. So they focus on other things like friendship or fitness or career. I wonder if people will become so comfortable being alone and self-sufficient that relationships actually start to feel like inconvenient and actually risky. Kenneth, what do you think?
So we see from the singlehood research, actually women are a lot more satisfied being single compared to men. I think what we want to promote is a thriving singlehood, where people who are single feel like they are thriving, they are flourishing, they have good well-being. And I think what this does is it gets them ready for the next step. What we then need to, I think, try to figure out is what keeps people from, when they're single, to what extent would they say, okay, is having another person going to be a value add to my life? We keep thinking about things in cost benefit analysis, right? And so if I'm so happy single, what good is another person going to bring for me? There's something that I teach in class, which is there's some research showing that having a conscientious partner actually gives you higher chances of a job promotion, your income goes up.
What?
Yeah. Shown in the research.
What? Okay, this is new information to me.
Yeah. Not just depending on your own conscientiousness, but having a conscientious partner actually helps with your job satisfaction, your income, your promotion chances as well. So I think people we're trying to figure out at what stage does that self-sufficiency become an impediment to future relationships, or to just, hey, actually I want to take the next step. Yeah, I think that's something that we are trying to figure out as well.
All right. So I want to end off with this question for both of you. Because the government is so vested in people dating because they want to have people having babies, right? Is there anything that they can do to get people to start dating and consider marriage? Zhiqun?
Yes, I'm very excited when of course, I think recently the government has set up a unit, right, task force to tackle this problem in general, and do see some initiatives coming up, right? There's some along the idea of incentivizing more dates by free meals, right? I'm not sure if that's the right approach, but I think directionally that's good, right? Where the government is putting more emphasis on that, right? So I do think the government can help, maybe in not the manners that we think of, right? I feel what government does best and has huge power and influence is the idea of how Singaporeans view success, right? So, and I think that it will be the root factor in terms of how we encourage everyone to date more, to have better relationships, maybe start a family in general. Because the previous narrative, at least in my days growing up and maybe my parents' era as well, the Singapore dream has always been, for you to be successful, you need to study hard, right? You need to, do well for PSLE, A-levels, O-levels, right? Get to the good university, get a good job, then you win, right? And I've been following that path religiously, but somewhere along the lines, I do feel that there are some bits of trade-off, right? If you look at Singapore in a more capitalistic society, which is great, I love it, it's so safe and it's flourishing. The trade-offs can come in from a social perspective in terms of fulfillment, in terms of the amount of time you spend with your family, right? Because you are more focused at work, right? Previously, if I were to ask you, Natasha, do you think financial success is more important than maybe the success of your own personal relationships, right? What would you say?
Damn, that's not what I was gonna. It depends on the period of my life. So I think right now it is important if I'm doing it on my own right now. But I think maybe when I was younger, finding a partner was more important, but it didn't happen. So
I see.
Okay, moving on.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I mean that's what the government can have a very clear idea of what success looks like, right? is it mostly financial stability, and does that equate to success? Or can we put a little bit more weight into some level of fulfillment in terms of family relationships, right? And once that is established, I think it becomes inevitable that we will want to date more, and we want, because we have the inner values of, building relationships and maybe having a family in general. And of course, it takes a while to get there, right?
Kenneth?
I definitely think some of these norms regarding success have to be shifted a little. And I mean, government has been trying to say a little bit about how education is not the be all and all. I think the focus should not just be on romance, even though I spend all my time thinking about romance. Social connection, I think, is not just about our sense of fulfillment and well-being, but it's also a public health policy issue. So
I have never heard anyone say that, but that's the first for today.
I mean, like friendships, social connection is I think just as important to our physical and mental well-being, as financial success and all the other things. So I think definitely education is one way we could get at it. Just teaching a little bit more about social skills, social capital, and how that's important. What we don't want to do, what we don't want Singaporeans to be thinking is that, oh, now I'm being forced by the government to do all this for national service again. And that changes the motivation. It's almost like a force kind of motivation. Oh, I have to contribute to the country again. Am I not enough? Whether it's for babies, whether it's for marriage, intergenerational stuff. But what I think the government can help is to build more third spaces in which social connection can be engendered a lot more autonomously, a lot more spontaneously. I think that's where when we are wanting to do this of our own accord, that's where I think the best kind of relationships happen, the best outcomes will happen.
All right. So I've learned a lot today from both of you, particularly that I'm not getting a promotion because I do not have a partner. So after this, I will work on it. But also to sum it up, I think we've been hearing a lot about how we should date authentically, and that fundamentally dating is about two flawed people coming together and like finding themselves. And, as Kenneth, as you mentioned, I think perhaps maybe we might want to start dating younger and like exploring when we're in school and we build our skills to eventually find our
parents don't come looking for me.
Great caveat. On that note, thank you both for being here. And that's it from The Usual Place. Now, if you're watching us on YouTube, do subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you won't miss new episodes of the podcast. And if you have thoughts on what we just discussed, do drop a comment on YouTube. Or if you're a man in AI, does high rocks, drives an EV, do talk to me on Instagram at The Usual Place Podcast. I'll see you soon.